David Haye has teamed up with Richard Schaefer to form a new promotional company in the UK called Hayemaker-Ringstar. They had a press conference yesterday, which I watched, which I found interesting and also pretty amusing because of some of the things that were said in the press conference. Interesting because they say they've been talking to several terrestrial UK broadcasters in terms of having a view to put their promotions on those terrestrial stations. They didn't mention satellite stations. So I guess that would have to rule out the likes of BT Sport, / Box Nation or Sky. So, and they mentioned, I think Richard Schaefer said about 3 or 4 different British terrestrial broadcasters. Who could they be? Maybe one of them could be Dave. Maybe one of them could be ITV, Channel 5, BBC possibly. Could they be trying to get back into boxing? It is interesting. And as you know, if you followed my channel for any length of time, I'm a big advocate of having as much terrestrial free-to-air boxing as possible. That's the way that you build grassroots support for the sport. So that to me was very interesting. I can't wait to find out which terrestrial broadcasters will be looking to work with Hayemaker-Ringstar. Now, the amusing part of it was when David Haye's manager at some point during the press conference said that values are very important to David Haye. Values like honesty and integrity. Honesty and integrity do not belong in the same sentence as David Haye. However, what I will say, to be fair, is that David Haye is very economical with the truth. And he's done some very shady things in terms of dubious reasons for pulling out of fights and whatnot and messing other fighters around. But those are his opponents. When David Haye did sign several fighters earlier on in his promotional career, if you want to call it that, people like David Price, so on and so forth, they didn't get messed around in terms of being tied to contracts or ending up in legal disputes with David Haye when they wanted to leave Hayemaker. So he does have a track record so far anyway, of allowing fighters to break free of their contracts if they want. He wasn't being unreasonable. And that was the main thrust of what was said at this press conference to announce this collaboration between Richard Schaefer, Ringstar and Hayemaker, is they were saying we are pro-fighter. The fighter comes first. We put the fighter first and we are the employees of the fighter. So they were spewing out all the necessary rhetoric to try and get fighters to actually sign with them and trust them. David Haye's saying, well, I'm a fighter myself. I know what it takes. I know how hard it is. I know how you can get messed around by promoters and all these other unscrupulous people in the boxing industry. And I am here to remedy that. I'm here to give fighters an alternative to getting messed around by all these unscrupulous promoters who have never laced on a pair of gloves in their life. They don't know what it's like. They don't know the blood, sweat and tears and the sacrifice that professional boxers have to put in. I do understand it because I'm a pro boxer myself. So you can trust me more so than you can trust these other people that have never laced up a pair of gloves. Although the other side of David Haye's partnership is Richard Schaefer, a guy who's never boxed. Again, if you follow my channel for any length of time, you'll know I'm a big advocate of fighters becoming promoters. Not just being self-promoted, which David Haye has been for the majority of his career now. Not just being self-promoted, but also boxers becoming promoters of other boxers. If you look at Golden Boy, which is a situation that was also, well, there is massive parallels between the situation here between Schaefer and Haye and Schaefer's relationship with Oscar De La Hoya, because when him and Oscar De La Hoya started Golden Boy, De La Hoya was still fighting just the way that David Haye is still fighting. And this is something Schaefer actually brought up at a press conference. So it really is Schaefer trying to emulate or redo exactly what he did with Oscar De La Hoya, but this time in the UK. And I'm sure he's learned from the experience with Oscar, and he's put certain stipulations and provisions in the contract to prevent it going sour the way that it did with Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya obviously still controls Golden Boy Promotions. It's still his entity Richard Schaefer left with very little. Well, other than Oscar De La Hoya's fighters, but you could say Al Heyman took his fighters rather than Richard Schaefer. But anyway, let me not digress too much. The point being, I've always been a big advocate of fighters being promoters because, in my view, in fact, I think this is demonstrable, but I think that fighters have more sympathy. Fighters who are promoters have more sympathy with the fighters, and they treat them more fairly than individuals who have never laced on a pair of gloves in their life, like a Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn, Bob Arum, so on and so forth. I think fighters generally, there's always exceptions, but I think fighters generally will treat other fighters better if they are promoters. Yeah. So I'm glad to see Haye doing this with Richard Schaefer. I'm glad to see more competition for the likes of Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren, so on and so forth. And I'm glad to see more boxing going on terrestrial television. So at the moment, I'm happy. We have to see how it unfolds. But yeah, as far as the announcement, I'm happy that this is happening and going ahead. The more the merrier is what I say. So, and one point I was going to make is Oscar De La Hoya, when he started Golden Boy with Richard Schaefer, they brought in a lot of reforms into the boxing industry in the United States. For example, prior to Golden Boy, boxers never even got to see their pay slips. They never got to see a breakdown of how much money they were getting out of the show. They were just given a check and told to just go away and be happy with your check. Golden Boy were one of the first companies that actually gave some transparency for the fighter so he could see where all the money was going from the show. As incredible as that is, that's how murky and unscrupulous a lot of boxing promoters were. Most boxing promoters were. They wouldn't even let the fighters see a breakdown of where all the money is going from the show, the TV money and the gate and all that type of stuff. They would just give them a check and told them to shut up. Yeah. Oscar De La Hoya brought in reform. Why? Because he was a fighter himself. So he doesn't want to screw over other fighters the way he got screwed over. This is why I'm a big advocate of fighters becoming promoters. And there's no question, say what you like about Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy, they treated fighters from the get-go a lot better than the likes of Don King and Bob Arum, who were the main guys that were around when Oscar De La Hoya first came into the business with Golden Boy. So now we've got David Haye teaming up with Richard Schaefer, a very similar situation to Schaefer teaming up with Oscar. And we'll see where it goes in the UK. I know that Ringstar, which, as far as I'm aware, will still be a separate entity from Hayemaker-Ringstar when it operates in the United States. Ringstar recently signed Tony Yoka, who is the gold medalist from the 2016 Rio Olympics. He's French. He beat the British fighter Joe Joyce in the finals. Controversial, but he got the gold medal at the end of the day, and he managed to get to the finals, so you have to give him credit for that. I personally thought he did legitimately win, but other people feel otherwise. So that's a good signing right away for Ringstar, to sign an Olympic gold medalist, a super heavyweight. That's marketable. So yeah, we'll see where this goes. Let me know what you think about this pairing between David Haye and Richard Schaefer to form Hayemaker-Ringstar. If you've got any information about which broadcasters they've been talking to or which broadcasters they could be doing deals with and getting fights on with, then please, I'll be very interested to know. Drop it all in the comment section below. All right? It's Hatman, I'm out.